Welcome to the Time Management Podcast with me, your host, Abigail Barnes. I'm a productivity coach, global speaker, time management author, and award-winning entrepreneur on a mission to share the 888 formula with the world and to remind you that it's your time. Leave it to me to bring you new time management tips, tricks, tools, and strategies, to introduce you to guests, research, and case studies from around the world, and to give you a simple 5-step process you can follow to uplevel your productivity, achieve your goals, and create a life that exceeds your wildest dreams. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started. Welcome to the show. Today, I am delighted to be joined by the amazing Annie Croner. Annie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here.
Let's just dive straight in. Who is Annie Croner in a nutshell?
I was a career executive assistant, had a 20-year career, never saw myself leaving the role. Started coaching assistants around 6 years ago, and it's become my passion. And I actually made the leap into full-time coaching a little over a year ago. I think why we connect so well is that we're both really passionate about time management and about self-care as well, and about actually leveraging our time management skills to that end. And so I'm also a mom, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I love smoothies and running and all things fun. I love to dance too, like social dance. So that's me in a nutshell. I would say that I'm typically lean towards being really outspoken, and I try to advocate for those in the EA space and in the strategic partnering space. So that's a bit about me in case you're unfamiliar.
And not to spoil the conversation, but just so that you stick around to hear this bit, Annie and I come at the well-being point of view from a shared experience. ... Let's talk about what your relationship was like with time back in the day, and then fast forward to where we are today.
I would say that my relationship with time has always been really interesting. I think that I've always had this desire to maximize my time. I think at a certain point in my life, though, I was focused on all the wrong things. I was focused on making everyone else around me happy. I was focused on making sure that everyone else was taken care of, as we do often as assistants. And that led to extreme burnout because I wasn't actually managing my time effectively to take care of myself. I kind of put myself on the back burner. And so I would say that my journey with that over time has been much more holistic when I think about time. Ever since I had my burnout, and we can get into that if you want to, Abigail, but ever since I had my burnout several years ago at this point, I've slowly built my life back intentionally, and I've actually built in time for myself. When we talk about time management, we often talk about it in terms of our productive output at work, at the office, and that's fine. I'm really more interested in a broader conversation around how we can better take care of ourselves and how we can work time in to take care of ourselves, and how we can actually build in time too to know what it is that fills us up and brings us joy, to actually investigate those things that are going to make our lives more whole and more joyful and more complete, I guess. So that's kind of my history with time. I also like to view it in terms of energy. Like, we aren't just managing our time, we're also managing our energy as well. Marrying those two concepts together to ensure that you're living a whole life. My brand is called The Whole Assistant for a reason, because I want to make sure that we're looking at the whole person and not just the assistant in a role. And how that person can manage and level up and all those things. I think that it really is a holistic look at time and how we utilize it.
I'm so excited to unpack this. Before we go to that next step, let's just deep dive a little bit more into the story. What was the wake-up call that helped you to see time in a different way?
I think that you and I have a very similar story. So I actually had a stroke at the office back in 2012. I was working as EA to the CEO of an accounting firm. It was the middle of tax season. I had gotten up in the middle of the night before with a splitting headache, went back to sleep, woke up, went to the office the next day. I remember telling my colleagues and coworkers I was just feeling a little bit off that day. And I got up mid-morning to go to the back of the office to get something to eat. We had a kitchen in the back of the office, and I blacked out a little bit back there. And then I realized I had to make it up to the front of the office. I realized that something was really, really wrong. And by the time I made it back up to the front of the office, the left side of my face was drooping. My left leg was dragging behind me. I had plenty of words to say. I couldn't say them. And so it was a really dramatic experience having a stroke at the office. I was life lighted. The doctor saved my life. It was a whole to-do. And the recovery from that was really intense, for sure, which is why I just have such a heart and passion for helping assistants to know how to manage their time and energy to take better care of themselves, as well as to kick butt at work. I really believe in assistants embracing their badassery. That's part of my tagline now. So I do think that you can be this amazing kick butt strategic business partner and take exquisite care of yourself as well. So that's what I like to walk my clients through. I got to tell you, it's been a journey ever since 2012 to really build a life that serves and supports me now. That is my reason, because I just want to make sure that nobody else goes through the same thing I went through. And I know that you also had a kind of dramatic story of burnout yourself that involved a stroke. I think that we're like, hey, high five. We actually have something really, really in common here.
First of all, I want to honor you for sharing your story. Thank you so much for sharing it on the podcast and for your vulnerability. And second of all, for the benefit of the listeners and the viewers, I want you to understand that Annie and I are both smiling through this as Annie shares her story about a near-death experience, and I am smiling as well. And we need to unpack this a little bit more to get everybody onto the same page. Mm-hmm. Not only did Annie have her stroke in 2012, as I did, Annie has a second chance at life, as I do. And I truly feel that we are almost the same human living in two different parts of the world with the same mission, because we've both been to the same place. And where Annie's saying that it has been a journey of rebuild, if you've listened to the podcast before, you've heard me talk a little bit about my stroke and the story. It's been a journey of rebuild for myself, and everybody's stroke is different. Everybody has different challenges to overcome. I was very fortunate that I walked away from it with no disability. My journey has been around mental health, PTSD, and figuring out how to live my life when the foundation of it has fundamentally shifted. This episode isn't going to be entirely about near-death experiences. Let's build from, you thought you were going to die. The biggest fear that we all have is that life is going to end. What would you like anybody listening to the podcast to know and to take away as a please do this before you die lesson?
You're right. I think that is everybody's biggest fear. But honestly, as I was in the helicopter being life flighted to the nearest capable facility, because in the town I was living in, they were not properly equipped to be able to deal with my situation. So I had to ride in a helicopter. And I'll never forget, this overwhelming wave of peace just washed over me. And I think I knew in that moment that if I died, everything would be okay. I felt like just this immense peace. But if I lived, everything would be different. And so I think, like, first of all, death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. I think a life lived unintentionally is the worst thing. Actually not knowing and liking your reasons why you're making the decisions you make, making them to please other people or to make someone else happy, not living for yourself in a way that fills you up, not giving back to others. Those things are where the magic is really at. When I say that I knew life would be different, I think I knew in that moment that the stroke was actually the missing piece for me in a way, because like I had overridden my inner knowing. I'd overridden all those things that I knew to be true to myself for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that I was born and raised in a former pioneer town, and my great-grandparents helped settle the town. And like, we're pioneer stock, and we've got to like push on through, and we've just got to like make anything work. And I was in a failing marriage at the time, and I was trying to hold it all together myself, and I was trying to do all the things. And I'm like, I got this, and I can make it work, and I can single-handedly do all the things. And then when I had my stroke, it was like a cosmic reset button was hit. And it's like, no, you actually can't do all the things. And now you have to choose between taking care of yourself. Well, that was the only option, really. Like, there was no other option. I had to go to physical therapy. I had to do all these things. My brain had to rewire itself in interesting ways. And so I had to take care of myself. And I say that that's like the most beautiful gift I've ever been given. I don't fear death anymore. I think now I've created this amazing life, and I fear not being around for it. I'm like, I just want to be around for this life that I've created that is really cool and very awesome. And I want to be around to see my clients succeed. I want to be around to see my boys grow up. And I think that would make me really sad to go now. But I also know that like there are a lot of things that are worse than death. So I think that that's the primary takeaway from that experience. It's like, oh, death's not that bad. It's fine. It's no big deal. But like these other things, they matter. I'd be curious to hear your take on that too. Like, what was your experience?
I honestly could hear you talk about it all day, because somebody who has been through this situation, people like you are very few and far between. I don't get the opportunity to speak to many people who've been to the same place I've been to and come back again. But for the benefit of the listeners, my experience was different to Annie's. And if you want to hear more about my experience, because this episode is about Annie, not about me, tune in to Annie's podcast, which is called the Whole Assistant Podcast, where I will be a guest on that podcast sharing my story over there. What would you say to the assistant who is really in the thick of it right now? They are feeling all the things. They are feeling overwhelmed, they're juggling, they're where you were back in 2012. What would you say is the first thing that they could do to get on the journey, to quantum leap to where you are right now?
Really cultivate trust with yourself. Listen to that inner voice that so many of us override on a daily basis to placate others and to make things easier for others. And I get it. I am a mom. I was an assistant for 20 years and I have clients that I love and want to support. And so really carving out that time for yourself to figure out what fills you up and brings you joy. And then actually making sure that you're prioritizing yourself such that those things get attended to as well. So many times we don't even consider what it is that we need in the moment. We don't even consider what it is that will make us happy because we're so busy trying to make everyone else around us happy. That's my first kind of strategy, is to just touch base with yourself. Actually allow yourself to answer the question, what do I want? I think also socialization plays a role in this. Most of us who are socialized as women in the Western world have been socialized to not upset the apple cart, to not rock the boat, to make sure that everybody else is tended to before we tend to ourselves. And I think that we need to land a little bit higher on our priority list. So that's the first thing. Really getting clear on the priorities, especially if you're a busy assistant and you've got a lot going on, aligning yourself with your executive's priorities and then tending to those priorities. And I think that a lot of us want to be everyone's yes person, and that's just not sustainable for anybody. And so figuring out what the priorities are, focusing one at a time on the priorities until they're off your plate is a great strategy for, first of all, bringing focus back into your day. And focus is great because focus is key to eliminating overwhelm. Because when we're focused on one thing, then all the other things kind of fade away. Allowing yourself that gift of focus can go a long way in overcoming the feeling of overwhelm that we often have as executive assistants when we're trying to take on everything all at once. First of like not giving everything equal weight and actually figuring out what the priorities are is key for all of us in the working world, but especially for us as executive assistants, because we do have so much going on and there are so many details. That would be my advice to anybody that was in my shoes that is currently where I was back in 2012, is to just like slow your roll a little bit, take a breath, take a beat, take care of yourself, and then get to work and focus and know the priorities.
Can you give us an example of how you would coach a client who would come to you and perhaps they are empty from serving their executive? Can you give us an example of how you would coach them to make time for themselves, make time for their well-being, make time for their hobbies, their personal development? Because I'm sure they're coming to you, Annie, and they're saying, I just don't have time for any of this. I'm flat out doing the job. How do I have a life?
I had to learn this lesson the hard way as well, like boundary setting and developing those strategic parameters around your time and energy to allow yourself to really tap into those things that bring you joy, both within your role and then like with your role, right? Because there are two different types of boundaries I would address with my clients. And so the first one is your boundaries with your role. Are you okay with working after hours? Are you okay with working through your lunch? Are you okay with those things? And there was a time in my career, even after 2012, where I was totally okay okay with working all hours of the day because I didn't have little kids. And I honestly love to work, and work was such a big part of my identity and still is to this day. There was a time where it did not bother me at all to work all hours of the day. Then when I had my babies, my values shifted, of course, as they do throughout life. So I think, first of all, where I like to start with clients is to get really clear on what they're valuing currently. So we do a values exercise to be able to track what they're valuing currently. And I think there's also a lot of FOMO out there, like fear of missing out. We think that we should value certain things, but I think that we are all unique individuals. And so how I like to harness the uniqueness of each individual client is by starting there. And then it really is a matter of like setting those parameters for yourself, having the conversations with your executive around, hey, like when the end of my workday is done, I really prefer to be done. Of course, if an emergency comes up and you need something shifted for the next morning or something like that, please feel free to text me. Otherwise, email me and I will get to it in my inbox the next day. The pushback that I often receive when I am working through this with my clients is, what if my executive's not okay with that? What if they actually want somebody who is willing to be on and responsive 24 hours and I don't want to do that? Well, then we've got a want match misalignment. A want match is when you want what your executive wants and there's 100% alignment in how it's to be done and when it's to be done and all of those things. I think it's really important that you have a want match in your role. There is no such thing as a 100% want match. There just isn't. But like on the key points of how you want to live your life, there should be some semblance of a want match there. I think a good place to start is to actually have the conversation with your executive around your time and energy, around how you're utilizing it, both at the office, like, hey, I don't think I can take on this project for this other ancillary person right now because I've got A, B, and C on my plate. And I want to make sure that I'm present for those things. And I want to make sure I'm present for you. Also with your role, like, hey, I cannot work past 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever time you want to stop work. Most of us, we have not even had those conversations with our executives. And we're like, oh, this isn't a want match and I want to move on. No, like you actually have to advocate for yourself to know whether or not it's going to be a want match or not. That's how I coach my clients. And these are the things that I work through with my clients, and we deal with all the thoughts. So in my coach training, we deal with something called the model, which is based loosely on cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm not a cognitive behavioral therapist, but we definitely look at the math of the situation, like the circumstance. The circumstance is neutral. It's proven in a court of law, like facts. And then the thoughts that we have about that circumstance, and then how those thoughts cause us to show up in our roles and in our lives and all of those sort of things. And we pick at those things. And so I'll pick at beliefs that you may have around yourself and your role. I'll pick at those beliefs that you may have about your executive and everything, just to make sure that you know and like your reason why. You have to know your reason for every decision that you make. I also require my clients to like their reasons. That would be my process for coaching someone through this. And I've coached so many people. I mean, this is the number one thing that we struggle with is like, I really want to be like this badass at the office. And I also kind of want to have a life too. So how can I rectify those things and how can I make everything work together?
That is incredible. I love the want match. That truly is a top tip. If we're not on the same page, we are just constantly going to keep bashing heads over and over and over. And like you were saying earlier, identifying your values, that helps you to identify your executive's values. And I love that you coach them through all of the possible ways to do it. If we don't know how to do it, how on earth are we ever going to learn if we're not coached? It sounds like such a valuable exercise. Yeah. What are your top tips for managing the overwhelm that comes with juggling multiple tasks?
My top tips are really there again, knowing what the priorities are and then saying no to make room for yes. We only have 24 hours in a day. In order to especially strategically partner with our executives, we are going to have to say no sometimes to lower level tasks or things that other people are asking us to do just because we are the go-to in the office. We're the person who knows everything. We're the person who's super helpful. We are going to have to start empowering people to come up with their own solutions. And I like to phrase it this way. It's totally possible to be solutions oriented for people and to empower them towards a solution and to not be the boots on the ground person creating the solution. It's just a higher level of thinking. And with the overwhelm comes from like giving equal weight to everything and from like looking at everything. So I would say Definitely get a task tracking system that serves and supports you. I track my tasks through Trello because it makes sense for me, and I can actually email tasks to my Trello board. I can create recurring tasks. I'm a big fan of any task tracking system that's centralized and digital. And the reason that I don't like it to be your inbox or whatever is because as you're hanging out in the evening and something pops into your brain and you want to add it to your list, like, what do? We get in our inbox and we email it to ourselves, or I did before I actually onboarded this new way of thinking and this new system. It's just not helpful because then you're like in your inbox and then you're go down like the email rabbit hole. And then you're replying to emails after hours, which is then training your executives and everyone you work with that you're going to be responsive to emails after hours. That it's just not a winning proposition. So I like to have a task tracking system aside from my inbox, and Trello is great because it has an app that I can just pop on and do really whatever works for you in terms of the technology. I'm a fan of, but I do recommend digital and centralized task tracking. Even just getting it out of your head and seeing it all in one place can go a long way in staving off the overwhelm. And then you can prioritize effectively, and then you can ask your executive clarifying questions with regards to their priorities. Then you actually have like a launching point for further discussion around those priorities. And then it's just a matter of like taking off the priorities and creating space and time for yourself to focus. Those are my best tips for eliminating overwhelm.
This is incredible. It's like a coaching session in itself. Let's do a quick 4-question quick fire round,
Okay.
as I would love to then spend more time deep diving into the conversation around well-being. Question number 1. How did you handle your emotions in the heat of the moment?
Not always well, but I think just taking a step back is key. And then I also now try to parse out the data from the drama. I give myself some time to process what I'm feeling and thinking, but then I always only address the data. The drama dies then. Like when we're actually addressing the thing itself and the underlying concern, the drama around it tends to dissipate. That's my number one strategy, separating the data from the drama.
Question number 2. What do you do to keep calm and stay grounded when others aren't?
I like to think of myself as the anchor. Up top, there are winds and there's waves. And like, especially in a work environment, especially with my executive, like my executive can be all over the place. But if I'm calm, then that gives me the presence of mind to know how better to show up for them. That is always the best policy and the best way of being as an assistant. And I will say that most of us are empathetic. Most of us are really strong empaths, which is a superpower in our roles, but can also hinder us because what ends up happening is we take on other people's energy. And so really like handing back other people's anxiety or challenging emotions to them because we cannot solve for anybody else's emotion. And then really standing in your power with regards to who you want to be in that moment and maintaining a level of certainty and solidarity and your abilities to handle any situation and to look at any situation objectively can be a grounding force for your executive and for the rest of the team in those like, oh no moments, just really, what I love about that too is it does give you clarity. It gives you clarity of thought and mind to be able to handle the situation so much better than if you're actually like heightened yourself.
Question number 3. What are your top tips for avoiding burnout as an assistant?
First of all, knowing what it is you love to do, making time for what it is you love to do, setting the boundaries you need to set for yourself, giving up on being everyone's yes person, recognizing and realizing like, how your body plays a role in that. By that, I mean, whenever we solve a problem for somebody, we get a dopamine hit. And it can be really easy to want to take on other people's things for that dopamine hit or to be helpful, or even because we can't say no, right? Like that's a whole other side of it if you feel like you can't say no. So those are my best tips for not burning out.
Question number 4. What advice would you give to an assistant who's maybe feeling lost and alone in their role and in their organization?
Oh man, I see this so much. So this is a real thing, like feeling siloed and feeling like you have nobody to talk to and feeling like you have nowhere to turn for support and help, or you don't even know what normal looks like because there is nobody else in your office environment who has a similar role. I think just as much as you can network and connect with others who get it, like there are just so many online resources these days. And I host, I'm going to be hosting them monthly through the rest of this year, like get-togethers just online where we just get together, we share stories and we just network just to know that you're not alone. And I feel like that's one of the big things about hiring a coach, and one of the things I work with my clients on a lot is like, oh, it's just so great to have a sounding board. It's just so great to have somebody to turn to ask a question. It's just so great to like be like, is this situation okay? Because I feel like it's not. And to kind of have that sounding board and that person you can turn to is so valuable. But I do feel like you can get that too just in community. So as much as you can get yourself into a community of like-minded professional executive assistants, and there are so many online, again, you can always email me at annie@wholeassistant.com, and I can send you a ton of resources that way, because I also was looking for community back in 2018 when I started the Whole Assistant. I've come across so many amazing communities for assistants. So connection, I think, is the key.
What's the number one thing that you want to tell assistants that you think they don't already know?
I think it's that you're already a badass. We often downplay our own strengths, and we often assume that what we can do, everybody can do. I got news, like common sense, not that common. Trust me. Like, I've been an executive assistant for 20 years. It's not that common. And so leveraging your unique strengths and what is your superpower and how can you leverage your superpower to show up for your role and for your executive at such a higher level, that would be the number one thing. We often downplay our strengths instead of harnessing them. And so, yeah, I think I would want everyone to know that you're already kicking butt. It's just a matter of like figuring out and articulating your value and knowing your worth and being able to see yourself and see your strength as your unique value proposition.
And for somebody who's never been fortunate enough to have an assistant, what would you be telling them an assistant could do for them?
I would tell them that an assistant could maximize everything for them. If they're a business owner, round out their business by offering them a unique perspective and take. If they work in a company, could really help them navigate the waters of politics, of interpersonal dynamics, of their time management. A good executive assistant and strategic business partner will help their executive know what their priorities are, and they will hold them accountable to their priorities. The value proposition of an assistant, it could be endless, really, in terms of your success as a business owner or even as an executive.
When you were an assistant, did you schedule your personal time in the same way that you scheduled it for your executive?
I did for the last 3 years. What it would look like for me, how I like to calendar things would be for myself. This is just calendaring for me. I like the rest / personal / fun time to go on my calendar first. And then I know full well that I have a full like client load throughout the day and all of those things. In order to create an intention for myself to actually follow through on the fun things, to actually follow through on my workouts, to actually follow through on the self-care piece, I actually had to plug those into my calendar. And I think that's where us as assistants kind of go wrong sometimes. We expect our executives to follow their calendar. We're not harnessing our calendars to support us. And that is a tool that we can totally leverage for our self-care. It's a tool that we can totally leverage for our success as well. I would really challenge all the executive assistants who are listening to this episode to really look at their calendars and how they can really leverage their calendar for their own purpose and success.
What I'm hearing you say is that in the last 3 years of your career, that's something that you did, and it's something that you do now as a business owner, and it's also something that you are recommending to assistants out there as a good habit.
100%.
Talk to us about your perspective of time today and how that shapes the business that you're building, the clients that you work with, the lifestyle that you have.
In this way, I'm actually in like evolution with my time right now. Over these last few months, my business has exploded. The systems that were once working for me are good. I need now as an executive assistant. I notice that I'm not utilizing my time optimally. I'm spending a lot of time in my inbox. I'm spending a lot of time scheduling. I'm spending a lot of time in the back end of my business, in the back end of my website, trying to figure out issues and whatnot there. For me right now, in terms of my time management, I'm trying to find, I would like to bring on like someone very part-time who can actually manage my inbox for me, who actually can help me run the business side of Whole Assistant a bit better and more streamlined. And so the topic of time and energy management is is a constant evolution for all of us. And it just depends on your needs at the moment. And I know for me, I'm really in this place now where like I'm trying to figure out how to leverage my time to be the most effective and how to leverage my time to focus on those high priority things that will drive the business forward. And it's funny because I think as an executive assistant, like, well, when I'm a boss, I will never do this. When I'm managing someone, I will never do X, Y, or Z. And I've had a virtual assistant since I started Whole Assistant, to be very honest with you. I've had somebody to help me run the back end, to make sure my podcasts land where they need to make sure that sales pages are up, to make sure all the emails go out and all of that. Now I'm just really recognizing real need for someone to help me manage my time better as I grow and as I kind of shift into like this new role. And it's not transferable. It's really not. Like you think that it is, you think that it would be, but for me, time management is an ever evolving topic, and energy management in particular is an ever evolving, like I'm in evolution with it all the time. And that is where I'm at currently. I know I need processes. I feel like I'm the process queen. So anytime I get overwhelmed, I'm like, I just need a process. I need a process to manage A, B, C, and D. And it's totally true. I do need a process, but I need someone to come alongside me and support me as I build those out, because I just have very little bandwidth for actually creating the processes myself anymore, which is a gift and a challenge all at the same time.
Annie, this is so exciting. And for the listeners out there, if any of you feel like you fill the job description that Annie has just outlined, all the links for Annie will be in the show notes. Don't be shy. Reach out to her, because that role could be yours.
Yes, that'd be awesome.
As we're wrapping up this conversation today, there's a couple more things that I would love to talk about. What's one thing you do with your time that you don't think most people do?
I am an early riser. I get up incredibly early. I do that to give myself some space before my day starts. I've got 2 little boys. They are very lively and full of life. And I just find that I need more time to myself to actually recharge. And so I'll go for a walk. There's a coffee shop a mile up the road from me. So I'll go walk up there in the mornings and I'll grab a cup of coffee. It kind of depends on your body rhythms. But if you're a morning person and you have a lot on your plate, I would strongly encourage yourself to give yourself the morning. Take the morning off and actually enjoy getting to know yourself. Those are 2 things that I really prioritize, is like getting to know myself better. I think that a lot of us spend our time behind a screen and we spend a lot of time with a lot of stimulation. And so actually getting to know yourself in the quiet and the still. I don't listen to podcasts when I'm on my walks, because I genuinely want to check in with myself. And I do that early in the morning. I'm not sure how rare that is, but it's something that I do for myself in terms of my time and energy management that has really paid off.
Thank you for sharing. How can we connect with you and find out more? Where do you hang out online?
I love LinkedIn. I think it's really easy to talk to executive assistants on LinkedIn, and you can find me. I'm the only Annie Croner. My website is a good resource as well. I actually have lots of downloadables and things like that for you to stay connected. And if you download something off my website, then you'll automatically be on my email list. And then I also have a podcast. So if you're listening to this, you likely like podcasts, the Whole Assistant podcast. You can find me at any one of those avenues, or just email me at annie@wholeassistant.com. I love meeting executive assistants. I love hearing people's stories and seeing what makes them tick and hearing what they're dealing with as well.
And as always, we have got you. All the links are in the show notes. Wherever you are watching or listening to this episode, everything you need is there. What have you got coming up?
I'm going to be at a couple different conferences this year, talking and speaking. I'm going to be at APC this fall in Denver, Colorado. Also host a lot of online events as well. So I'm going to be doing admin mingles online throughout the summer. And then my group program, launching that again in the fall. I'm very active on LinkedIn. You'll know because I'll be posting about all the things I'm up to on LinkedIn. I'd love for you to join in on any of those things. And I hope to see you there. It'd be fun.
Final question. What else would you like to add to this episode to call it complete?
I just want to encourage all the listeners that you don't have to have it all together all the time. And I think we often think that we do have to have it all together all the time, but you really don't. There are seasons of life, there are seasons of change and different things like that. I would just say be kind to yourself.
Annie Croner, thank you so much for your time. It has been a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show today.
Yes, no, my pleasure as well. And please check out my podcast, because I'm going to be there again interviewing Abigail as well.
Until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay well, and remember, it's your time. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you loved what you heard, be sure to let me know by leaving a review so I can keep the good stuff coming. Come and say hi on Instagram at Success by Design Training, or visit my website successbydesigntraining.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Abigail Barnes. Until next time, don't forget, you are amazing and it's your time.